Welcome to the Nerdstalgic podcast with your host, the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm. Nerdstalgic with the Ginger Bookworm.
Howdy folks, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Nerdstalgic podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Human. Hope you're doing well, hope you're all good, as per usual. Before I get into today's topic, just a bit of housekeeping. Make sure that you follow me on Twitter, well, formerly known as Twitter, now known as X, as Elon Musk would like us all to say, but we all know it being Twitter. Make sure you follow me on there at nerdstalgic_pod to be kept up to date on basically anything that I'm doing. Also, if you listen to this on YouTube and you haven't yet, make sure that you like, comment and subscribe and all that jazz, and make sure you ring that bell to be notified whenever I post a new episode. So now the housekeeping's out the way. Today we're going to be looking at Ice Age 4 Continental Drift. This is to follow on from, depends on from when I record this. I haven't released it yet. But if I had done it properly, Rio has already come out. The review for that's already out for that. So, firing on from Rio and Horton Hears a Who and all the other Ice Age movies that I've looked at, I'm carrying on my Blue Sky Studios series. For anybody who's new to the podcast, welcome. But if you are new, to give you a good sort of introduction to what this series is, basically, a couple months ago to last year, I basically decided that I wanted to look back at Blue Sky Studios, as they had recently been dissolved by Disney after Disney bought Fox, and I thought it was a bit of a shame because Blue Sky was a real cornerstone of my childhood, and it's just a shame to see them go. And so I wanted to highlight their work because, again, believe it or not, even though Ice Age was huge, that's all people really know them for, really. And they made a big splash, and they were here for a good 20 years or about that, and then they just was gone. So I wanted to look back on their movies, on their small catalogue of films, and just reminisce, really. So that's kind of the idea behind this series. As for this movie, I'll be honest with you, I don't have much memories. Like, if you're new to the podcast, you probably haven't, and I would recommend to go back and to listen to my reviews of Ice Age 1, Ice Age 2 and Ice Age 3, when the other Blue Sky, and any of the episodes really, but specifically the Ice Age ones. If you're going to do that now, or if you have done that, you will know that I'm just more of a big fan of the first Ice Age movie, and I feel like after Ice Age 1 they didn't have to make more films, but they just did, which again it makes sense because, like, for example, Ice Age 4, right? So this movie made, in total, at the box office, right, $879.7 million, right? So, it makes sense as to why they kept making these movies. They just kept making money, and people kept going to see them. Like, I kept watching them. I never went to see them in the cinema, but if they were on TV, I would watch them, I had the video games, I had the movies. I was once a young fan, but even from watching Ice Age 1 and growing up with them, even I, have matured and sort of grown to feel like, yeah, Ice Age 1 was kind of the perfect Ice Age movie, and they didn't need to make more, but they did because that's money, that's the business, that's just how it works. But I'm just really sour because I love robots, and robots never got a sequel. And again, I reviewed Rio, and I liked Rio, I had a fun time with it. Didn't really feel like it needed a sequel, but that movie got a sequel, Rio 2, but Robots didn't. I'm still very sour on that, and I know I'll never get one. But again, if you get round to, or if you had listened to my Robots review, you'll know that I feel like that movie doesn't need a sequel. I would like one, yes, I would, but it doesn't need one, And that's kind of my argument. I'm going off in a bit of a tandem here, but that's kind of my argument with like Pixar. It's the reason why I love Pixar so much for so long, and it's the same, DreamWorks. Why I love them for so long, and I still love them now. Don't get me wrong, but they made one and done movies. You had one movie, it told a story. The next movie was something different. And again, Toy Story 1, 2, they work. And Toy Story 3 works. And again, Toy Story 4, I went to the cinemas to watch that. And each one of them made me cry like a little girl. But the point I'm trying to make is the fact of they made original movies, and they did that for a long time. And then they start doing the sequels, and then more sequels, and it's like, okay, you know, like I'm a big fan of Wall-E. That's one of my favorite Pixar movies. I've got Wall-E figures, I've got Wall-E teddies, I've got Wall-E cups, I've got the movie on Blu-ray. I love Wall-E, right? I've even got the game on Xbox. I reviewed the video game. I'm a big fan of Wall-E, right? That movie is perfect on its own. It doesn't need a sequel. Would I like to see more from it? Of course I would. I'm a fan, right? But as a fan, I understand what it is and the story it tells, and I also understand that it does what it needs to do. And that's it. I have a start, middle, and end, and I don't need to see anymore. I would like to, but I don't need to. And that's how I feel kind of with Ice Age. And they kept making them. And you had Ice Age 2, which was alright, not great. I prefer Ice Age 3. Ice Age 3 had a bit of a slow beginning, but eventually, as soon as they got the dinosaurs in, that's when it started getting a bit interesting. And sort of they introduced Buck, and I love Buck. He's one of my favourite characters in the Ice Age franchise. And it's very much the fact of, so, we finally got the dinosaurs. We've Manny has got the family back. He's now got a child at the end of Ice Age 3. Even though I feel like they didn't need to be any more movies, I would say Ice Age 3 ends the story well. Like everybody has a resolution. Everybody has some sort of moment where it's like, okay, I realize who I am. I realize my place in the pride, and I'm happy, and that's it. But again, money talks, business talks. And because of that, they just kept making these films. And this is where we end ourselves now at Ice Age 4 Continental Drift. Because I'm going to ask a question. Where do you go after you've introduced dinosaurs? I'll give you one guess. And if you said pirates, you're damn right. Because obviously, makes sense. Where else would you go after dinosaurs? You'd go straight to pirates. And again, I make fun. I love pirates. I love dinosaurs. It's I haven't seen this movie in a long time. I haven't seen this movie as much as I've seen the other three Ice Age films. All I remember it is that they had pirates. We have pirates now. Kind of like Palpatine. Somehow Palpatine lived, and like somehow we have dinosaurs. Somehow we have dinosaurs now, which kind of makes sense to the dinosaurs. But like somehow we have pirates now, which is like, okay. And from what I remember of this story, because I haven't watched it, I haven't watched it yet. I'm going to watch it in a minute after I do this introduction. But from what I remember, the continents are starting to drift apart, which means the ice is breaking, which means the ocean is starting to basically become into... Well, the ocean's already been there, but, because of the ice melting, that the oceans are starting to unfreeze and are coming basically an ocean now, and the continents are starting to drift apart. And, you hear Manny and Diego, Sid, and Sid's grandmother, I believe, is introduced and involved. And now they're on the high sea, stuck on a piece of ice. And if I remember correctly, then they meet pirates, which I have many questions. How that works, how like the continents have only just started to pull apart, but all of a sudden you now have pirates and piracy. I know it's a kids' movie. I shouldn't be digging into it, and I'm more than likely I will in the review, because that's just the type of person I am. And if you're a regular listener to the podcast, I do this all the time, so it's not new to my current listeners. For anybody new, strap in, because it's gonna get. I'm going to go way too deep in a movie for kids, right? It always happens, and I try not to do it, but I can't help it. I go into these rabbit holes and I keep going. But yeah, we've had pirates. We have dinosaurs, and I think the last movie there's an asteroid and space and aliens. Why not? Let's just throw something at the wall and see what sticks. But again, it's a kids' movie, so there's not really much more you can comment. As for the synopsis, I'm going to try and do my my cool voiceover guy voice. This one's like, because it's an animated kids movie, I'm not going to go the deep one. I'm going to keep it a bit lighthearted, right? So, the storyline, the synopsis, the voiceover guy. Here we go. Right. When Scrat accidentally provokes a continental Catalysm with a storm, Manny is separated from Ellie and Peach is on an iceberg with Diego, Sid, and Granny, but he promises that he will find a way to return home. While crossing the ocean, they are captured by the cruel pirate Captain Gut and his crew. However, they escape and Manny plots a plan to steal Captain Gut's ship and return to his homeland in a dangerous voyage through the sea. Well, cross the sea, but anyway, but the cruel pirates seek revenge against Manny and his family and friends. Yeah, I messed up at the beginning there. The word catalysm, yeah, that word really struck my dyslexia for a second there, and I lost it. But I think I held it quite well halfway for the rest of it. But yeah, so that is the sort of synopsis of the movie. As for usually at this point, before I sort of end the introduction, I would do the production and talk about how the production that went into the ideas and concepts of how this movie was made and all that sort of jazz. But as for the first time ever, and I'm quite surprised about this, from all my research, I couldn't find anything on the production, not on Wikipedia, not on any of the sort of nerd wiki forums, nowhere online. All I could really find was every time they had something to do with production, it was all the same basically stuff. It's like somebody had copy and pasted it everywhere. It was just that the first details of the sequel were announced on January the 10th, 2010, and that apparently Blue Sky was working on a fourth film, and that the movie was then that came out in July the 13th, 2012, and that's all I can really find for the production. So instead, we're going to look at the box office, the critical response, the overall response from people to kind of get an idea of how not just reviewers but how the public really took this film, considering it made almost $1 billion, just to see what critics and the audience thought about it. So, on Rotten Tomatoes, the film has approval rating of 37% based on 136 reviews and an average rating of 5.1 out of 10. The site's critical consensus reads, Ice Age Continental Drift 3D. Oh, this movie was in 3D, by the way, because it was during the craze of all the 3D movies. I'm not going to watch it in 3D because who has a 3D TV anymore? Remember when 3D TVs were a craze? Yeah, I really show my age here. Anyway, Stage Content Drift 3D has moments of charm and witty slapstick, but it often seems content to recycle ideas from the previous films. On Metacritic, the film has a score of 49 out of 100 based on 29 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of -A on an A+ to F scale. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 2 stars out of 4 and stated, "Watching this film was a cheerless exercise for me. The characters are manic and idiotic. The dialogue is rat-a-tat-tat. The action is entirely at the service of the 3D, and the movie depends on bright colours, lots of noise, and a few songs in between the whiplash moments." Megan Lorman of The Hollywood Reporter said, "It's familiar, drawn-out schlick, and the humour lacks the subtlety of the first and best Ice Age, but there are some visually inventive reports." I really like Megan because she says the first and best, which is the first Ice Age movie. And I completely agree with you, Megan. First time I ever agreed with a reviewer, well, not a reviewer, should I say, a movie critic, to give them a proper word, because I never usually agree with them. It's probably the first time I'd ever agree with any of them on anything ever. So mark it down in characters. Luke's actually agreed with a critic for once. But yeah, first one, amazing. Yeah, see, she knows what we're talking about. Don't take my word of it. Take Megan Lomans of the Hollywood Reporter's word for it. Anyway, then we had Simon Brew, writing for Den of Geek, gave a very positive 4-star review, saying that not only is Ice Age 4 arguably the best in the franchise yet, it's also a little surprisingly, perhaps given that it's a fourth movie in the franchise, turned around on a strict cycle, turned out to be thoroughly entertaining family blockbuster. Ollie Richards of Empire Magazine gave the film 3 out of 5 stars and wrote, "Old friends and new voice talent will delight kids with a never-ending love for the most undemanding animation out there. A Mega Books franchise drifts on." So that's a critical response. Again, I do apologize about the production. I did try my best to find anything on the production, but there's nothing. They all just tend to repeat themselves. Um, but yeah, so that is my introduction of Ice Age Continental Drift. Am I really looking forward to it? Yes and no, because I haven't seen this movie in a long time, and I do like pirates, and I do like Peter Dinklage, and he's the voice actor of Captain Gut, So yeah, my interest is there somewhat. I don't have high hopes for it, and I would tell you, your beans now, don't have your uh, your aspirations high, because I'm going to knock down some walls, I'm sure, because I'll be surprised if I do like it. I'm surprised if I sit here and go, oh, it's a masterpiece. Probably won't. But, I always try to stay positive. I always try to, even things I don't like, I always try to see the upside to them, So, yeah, Ice Age 4, Continental Drift. Let's go watch it, shall we? Let's give it a go. Just when I thought I was done, they pull me back in. I've just finished watching Ice Age 4, and again, those sentiments, I was taking the mick, but generally those sentiments are true. I generally thought I was done, that I wasn't going to enjoy this one, but Ice Age and being such a big fan of it, it pulled me back in just when I thought, that's it, I'm not going to enjoy it, and I did, and I try my best to explain why. I'm not saying it's better than the other films and anything like that, but like there are things in here that are, even though it didn't need to be made, there are things in here that are like, oh, generally I enjoy that. So, so just when I thought I was done, or just when you beans thought that you were done, we're being pulled back in because they did it again with Ice Age, and here we are reviewing it once again for the fourth time. Close to the end now. We have one more film after this, right? So it will end eventually, I promise. But for now, Ice Age 4, right? So, once again, the lovable Scrat is back to wreck the day. And I love that they do this. I love that they bring Scrat for the beginning of the movie, because it not only sort of sets the scene for the movie, but also sets up the events of what is to come. For like Ice Age 2, they mostly did it from Ice Age 2. Ice Age 1 was mostly just, it was like a joke, really, like a little rat Scrat trying to bury his nut. Next thing you know, he parts the ice like the Red Sea, and then all of the people on the mass migration start to leave to go where it's colder, where all the other ice is melting. It's the same for Ice Age 2. He cracks the ice, it all starts to sort of melt and concave, and that starts the big meltdown. Ice Age 3, he's after trying to find his nut. He finds it, another girl finds it, and he finds himself underground with the sort of dinosaurs. So he doesn't really start that one, but again, it gives a reason for him being there, and him showing up around there as well. But still, I love how we get Scrat at the beginning of these movies, because it kind of sets the tone, sets the scene of like, yeah, like we're back in Ice Age. It feels good. It feels nice. It feels like, again, like a warm coat. Pardon the pun because it's Ice Age, but like a warm coat being put on, and you're ready for the adventure that is to come. In here, this is no different. Again, Scrat comes in, finds his nut, tries to bury it. He's learned from his mistakes. There's cracks in the ground. Straight away, he pulls it up, and he's like, oh, no. He reminds me of Mr. Bean. One of the reasons Mr. Bean works, and reason why Mr. Bean is so widely loved, universally sort of favoured by so many people around the world, is because it's a silent film, and because there's no language, because there's no sort of words being spoken, and it's all emotive, that what he feels and how and what he's doing just by his facial expressions of how he's moving and that sort of thing. And it's the same with Scrat. It's a fact of, we've gotten to the point now for all these movies that we know when he's happy, we know when he's sad, know when he's angry, know when he's stressed, know when like when he's like found his desire with his nut, he's like, ah, and when he's sad, he's oh, So we know the mannerisms now. So whenever you see it, it's like, oh, Scrat back. So again, it feels good, and I can see why Blue Sky Studios used him as a mascot, because it just worked. It really did sort of good to set the tone. And again, he finds his nut, buries it, sees the cracks. Oh no, moves it back, and then he slowly starts to. What is his obsession? I know rats and animals and rodents, that sort of thing, they tend to hide and things for the winter. But why didn't he just eat it? I know that's not the point, but he could just eat it. He's got an obsession with burying his nut, and each time he just ruins the world. This time, no different. He does it. Big crack falls through. He falls through all of the different layers of the Earth, different crusts, the mantle, and all that, straight to the Earth's core. And the Earth's core is made out of a solid block of iron. And he runs on top of it, and him running around it, and him jumping up and down and hitting the other sort of outer layer, makes this continental drift, which is kind of not, again, not logically, this is not what happened. Don't, like, okay, this didn't happen in real life, obviously, but the whole idea of continental shift, that did happen. As we know, this is why we have continents. This is why we, like, America's all the way over there, and Europe is how big it is, and you got Australia and all the other different islands around the Pacific. You know, it did happen, but obviously not like this. But I like how it all sets up as, like, Scrat is the reason why we have so many continents, because originally it was just Pangea. It was a giant supercontinent. And then eventually through crustal displacement and earthquakes and things like that, because the plates on are always moving, the tectonic plates are always moving. That's why we have earthquakes and things like that. And even though that it's stable now, an earthquake big enough could really change the poles and change where certain islands and where certain plates are, so the planet is alive, so it's always constantly moving. So we could have another continental drift eventually. Hypothetically, it could happen. We've got nothing to do to stop it. If it happens, it happens. Think, like, for example, the San Francisco fault line, that is due for an earthquake to be shifted, and it hasn't yet, and it will do eventually. Not to scare anybody who's listening to this who lives in San Francisco. Just be ready to book it, when you feel the first sign of a rumble. Just saying. But I liked how they brought Scrat into it. Like, Scrat is the reason as to why the continental shift happened. So I like that sort of thing. Again, it's nice. It really sort of sets the scene of, like, okay, we're ready for an adventure, ready for another Ice Age extravaganza. Have a little. It's like how can we explain it? It's like the opening act before the big play. You get the person to come in to really get the crowd warmed up, and then once they do their thing, then the main sort of act comes on, and that's when you get a good hour or so of joyous fun. And then the show's over. And that's how I like to think of Scrat, really, is the opener before the main event. Now to get onto the actual meat of the review. As I said at the beginning, I enjoyed the beginning of this movie more than Dawn of the Dinosaurs. It really gets going into the action a lot more quicker than the first movie does, because the problem with, well, not the first movie, but the last movie, Dawn of the Dinosaurs, it doesn't really slow down, at all. Because one thing that I had an issue with Dawn of the Dinosaurs, even though I enjoyed it for the most part, I didn't enjoy the beginning, is because this one didn't focus on, like, a mini Sid adventure, like Sid trying to be a father. It didn't focus on Diego. It didn't focus on a mini adventure with Manny. It didn't focus on a mini adventure with any of them. Yes, you could say Peachy, she's grown up now, she's a teenager. She had her own little mini sort of adventure where she was trying to meet up with the young sort of mammoths, and try to be cool and that sort of thing. But I wouldn't say it was as long as the Sid adventure of him looking after the eggs and him being a father and all that. It was mostly just to the point. It got to it. It got going, because I'm not interested in seeing a Diego spin-off. I'm not interested in a Manny spin-off. The reason why these movies work, and the reason why they were so beloved, was because of the herd, because they work better as a group. Yes, each one of them had their own comedic moments, but on their own, it didn't work as much as when they were together. And the only person who really works well on their own is Scrat, because he was made to always work on his own, him and his nut, him having craving to get his nut, that sort of thing. That's why that works compared to, it doesn't work when Sid goes off and does his own adventure and that sort of thing. So I like this movie for that we don't get sort of the long-winded, Sid's trying to be a father and all that, and Manny trying to deal with being a new father and all this jazz. Like, you don't really get that. You just mostly, Peaches has grown up. She's now a teenager. Again, Manny's a bit paranoid and all that, as you would be being a father, but it's not there for ages. It's there, and then the continents start to part. Manny, Sid, Diego, and Granny are all sort of brought away, shifted away from the from Peaches, and um God, I forgot her name. I remember all of them, but I forgot Manny's wife's girlfriend's name. Um, her Queen Latifah, lady, yeah, Queen Latifah, the lady she voices, the mama she voices. They're stuck on one side, and like the adventure goes off, and that's what I like. It's the fact of we've finally been able to get rid of this whole mini adventures, get rid of this whole huge herd sort of thing, and it really takes it back to the origins, really, the original team where you just had Diego, Sid, and Manny again, as well as Granny, who is my new addition to the team because Granny is just awesome. I love it. I love Granny. I'll probably say I love her just as much as I love Buck, just because her zany craziness and some of the random things she comes out of. Some of the things she's come out of, I'm sure most of our grandparents have said and come out with. And it's most things when you have your grandparents and they say these crazy things, you just go, okay, grandpa, grandma, come on over here. You know what I mean? As they slowly start to get older and they slowly start to lose their marbles, but you love them all the same. You know, um, so I really like Granny, but it's nice to have the team back as the original trio. You know, the original sort of, you just had Sid, Manny, and Diego trying to get back to their herds, coming back to land, really. And it's a nice sort of quick adventure. The whole pirate theme works as well. I wasn't a bit sure. Like, I've seen this movie before, but again, it's been a long time since I've seen it. And I think this movie came out in 2012, so I was in senior school, 2 years before I actually left school. So I was sort of in my prime of being a teenager. Not that I didn't like cartoons, but I think it was most of the fact of I had other things that were kind of took my mind off it, and I was focusing on other things that at the time I thought were more important, but now I'm 25, weren't really that important. But when you're in school, well, we've all been to school, we all know what I'm talking about, the things that we focus on then that aren't important, but were at the time. And I see now, sort of watching it now, the whole pirate theme, it works. I like it. You know, it makes sense again with the whole continental drift thing. Again, like I said in the introduction, it doesn't make total sense, the idea of did, again, not that the movie has to explain this because again it's a kids film and I'm going too deep into it than I should do, um, but it doesn't really explain if Captain Gut and his team were already sailing the seas before the continental drift happened, or did it, just the fact of the continental drift started to happen, and then within the events it started to happen to, it finally got to North America, which is where Ice Age, where, as we find out, Ice Age has always been set. um, then we find out sort of has like how long has it always been going on? Like, it doesn't really make sense of how this team of pirates have been doing this for so long. And again, I'm nitpicking. I'm going a bit too deep into it. No, because again, it does. I'm answering my own question. It doesn't need to explain it. It doesn't. But I'm just a stickler for those extra bits of details. But it's not important. The point is, right, that the whole pirate thing, it makes sense. I understand why they went with it because again, if they're going to be out to sea, it kind of makes sense. You'd have pirates. So I get it, and it's fun. Like, people like dinosaurs, people like pirates, right? The whole Treasure Island, and I love Assassin's Creed Black Flag. I love pirate games. I love the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I love pirates. Grew up with them. Everybody loves pirates, right? Sea shanties. This film's got them. They do a sea shanty. Um, Peter Dinklage really shows his pipes. All the whole crew get involved. It's great. We have swashbuckling. We have the epic fighting between pirates and Manny and Sid and Diego. Fun, love it. We have pirate ships, well, icebergs, but pirate iceberg ship things. Love it. They're there. We have Scrat on a journey for buried treasure. He finds a map that is going to lead him to his ultimate sort of desire, which is his ultimate treasure, which is tons of nuts. And that is what he's always wanted. So he's on his own adventure trying to find them. Where there are banshees, trying to lure lonely sailors from their ships into the sea so they can eat them. We have that. They really lean into the whole sort of pirate aesthetic of it, and I can really sort of commend it for that. Also, it was nice to have an overall bad guy. Like the first film, because in the first movie we had the overall bad guys, which were the saber-toothed tigers. I can't remember the name of the head sort of bad guy, but his leader of his pack obviously sends Diego off to get the little boy, the baby. He obviously Diego doesn't do it. He defects to Manny and Sid, and he has his own little herd, and then sort of we get that overarching sort of bad guy, bad sort of team. And then since then, the overall bad guy, apart from we had a few bad guys here and there, like sort of the Vulture in the second movie, and obviously Rudy in the third film. I don't count Rudy because again, Rudy's not an overarching bad guy. Neither is the Crow and the Vultures and that from the second movie. They're just there because again, they would be there because again, a dinosaur would be like you'd have a master predator of all the dinosaurs. That makes sense. You'd have one there again. If all these people are going to die in a giant flood, you're going to have vultures, you're going to have scavengers there. It all makes sense. They're just there. They're not evil, they're just predators, and that's just why they're there. So I don't count them. But the second and third movie are just sort of natural disasters. Even the first movie, in a way, is just like a natural sort of disaster. So it's nice to actually have a overarching villain like Captain Gut, who's played, again, fantastically by Peter Dinklage. Peter Dinklage does a fantastic job in this role. He makes the character fun, mischievous, and not, I wouldn't say scary for me, obviously, but obviously scary. Be a pirate. Be masterful. Be savvy, but also same stage. Be deadly. Be dangerous. I think a pirate captain should be, and he plays it so well. It did make me laugh though at the same time, is because I haven't heard Peter Dinklage's voice in animation or voiceover in a long time, and the last time I've heard his voice was when I played Destiny 1, and he did the voice of Ghost. And he was, I think one the first or second expansion, or maybe it was the Taken King expansion. I think his voice was replaced by, I want to say Nolan North, or another sort of well-known voice actor. I can't remember as to why, but I remember I was a bit bummed out because I'd gone on such a long adventure with Peter Dinklage, or as I called it, and a lot of the Destiny community called him Dinklebot. Um, I had a lot of adventures with him, and it was just sad to eventually like they just was like that's it, we're not having Peter Dinklage anymore. We're getting somebody else, and whoever's doing it now has done it all the way through Destiny 2 and all the new expansions for that. I still kept my Ghost Shell, my original Ghost Shell, in my inventory. I still have it. I haven't played Destiny 2 in a very very long time. Um, I'm not here to talk about Destiny. I'm just saying I still keep my Dinklebot, even though it's not saved as Dinklebot. I still know I keep it because I had such fond memories. But it was nice to have those sort of memories come back of, oh, I remember playing Destiny 2 and having Peter Dinklage shout in my ear like, "You've woken the hive." I was just like, memories, love it, nostalgia, great. So yeah, a great band of sort of characters, great band of swashbucklers, a great band of pirates. Again, Peter Dinklage does a fantastic job as Captain Gut. Really like it, very fast paced, really sort of brings in the whole not just pirate motif but really gets the action going because you can tell this guy is dangerous, he's out for revenge. He is a force to be reckoned with, so I quite like that. One thing that I do want to mention, and I think I've mentioned this in the prior reviews as well, I can't remember because it's been a while since I've done them, but I understand this series made crazy money. So obviously sequels were obvious because again, where there's money, where there's money, there's always something to be made from it. Whether it be a new product, a new book, a new film, a new show, a new game. If there are people there who are willing to shovel money, there are obviously going to be people who want more of whatever it is they're paying for. So it makes sense that even though I don't like it, that these films kept going and they kept making them until they eventually stopped making money, which I think even Ice Age Collision, which is the last movie, I think even that made money. Probably not as the others did, but I remember it making somewhat way of money. But the point is I'm trying to make is the fact of they keep, one thing I've noticed after watching 4 of these films is at the end of each movie they end it in such a way that it wraps up everything. Kind of like the end, like for example, the ending of this movie is the fact of they've defeated Captain Gut. Everybody, Manny and his wife and Peaches and the rest of the herd and all the other people that had managed to escape sort of the Continental shift are all on this ship, and they find themselves going to this island, which is tranquil, peaceful, and they sail off into the harbour. And as they do, it ends, and then it cuts to sort of Scrat, and it ends nicely with Scrat basically screaming to the camera after he has done all his mini adventure, his hijinks has ended, as most Ice Age movies do. But just before you get to Scrat, the movie ends as if that's it. It's like, our heroes have finally managed to find peace and serenity in each other, and they go off, and that's the end of the story. Obviously, in hindsight, we know they don't. But this is my issue with all of the Ice Age movies, and the reason why I feel like I keep saying it, and I've said it 3 times now, and I guess I'll keep saying it for this one and for the last one, is the fact of, because they end these movies in the way they do, at the end of the story, it pained me of like, well, why end it that way if you were just going to keep making them? And why wrap it up nicely, perfectly, if you were just going to keep making films, but then end them the same? The end of Ice Age 1, Manny, Diego, Sid, perfectly. I still say Ice Age 1 is a perfect movie. I love it. I have no issues with it. It is my favourite of all the Ice Age films. But that ends perfectly because, again, they hand the baby back. I said this many times before, so I'll be brief about it. But again, Manny has his sort of moment where he forgives humans. Sid finally gets the family he wants, and Diego gets the herd that he was looking for, the family, the pact, sort of what he was looking for all this time. Right? He gets it. It ends perfectly, done. Ice Age 2 comes about. End of Ice Age 2. Manny finds another mammoth. They get together. Life's good. Again, Diego realizes that he can swim. Well, not just he can swim, but also that he's still a predator. That he's still sort of being in a herd, being in this group hasn't made him soft. That he's still sort of an apex predator if he wants to be. And obviously, Sid is just Sid. But the point is, it wraps up perfectly. It wraps up all their overarching stories. Any sort of branching narratives all end right, and it leaves it with like, yeah, we can leave it here. Then they made the third movie, then this movie, then the last movie, and it's like, why keep ending it on such a note where all the threads have been sort of come to an end? Really, there's nothing more to kind of. There's no end credit scene. There's no sort of like, we saved the day, and then the camera pulls back, and then the overarching villain is there, and it's like, I'll get you next time, and then it ends. There's nothing like that that's there for it, like, gives you a reason for another one. And again, going back to what I said, I understand this series made so much money. I just don't understand why end it in the way that they do if they were just going to keep making more. But then again, I'm not a businessman. These movies make money, so they were going to keep making them no matter how they ended them. But I can respect Blue Sky Studios for being like, even though I just complained about it, I can somewhat pull myself away, the reviewer side of me away, and I can probably understand where Blue Sky Studios are coming from, being like, we might never get another Ice Age movie after this. This movie might not do as well as the last one, so let's end it well, just in case if it does end here, then again, this I don't know this for sure. I'm just sort of trying to think outside the box here, but potentially it could have been the people like, this movie won't make as much as Ice Age 2 or Ice Age 1, so we will end it in such a way that if it is the end, then this could be the end of the series. Obviously, as we know, that didn't happen. They still make money. So again, more films come. Again, I don't know that for sure. I'm just guessing as to maybe that is to why that these films ended the way they did. But yeah, that I just wanted to mention that because it's something I've noticed now after the fourth time watching these films. After the fourth time watching these films, I'm starting to pick up sort of certain things here and there, which as you would as you go through a series, you start to notice things a lot more and pick them up if you was watching them on their own randomly, then you wouldn't notice them as if you would if you was watching them in chronological order and reviewing them. So that's something I wanted to mention. But my overall thoughts of Ice Age 4 Continental Drift is I liked it. I did. I enjoyed it. It felt a bit short. Not that I wanted it to be long. It just felt a bit shorter. Now maybe that is because there is so much action in it that it kind of gets to the point a lot quicker. That because you're in that pocket of action from basically from the beginning to the end, it could be potentially the fact of because of that it it is a long film. It just doesn't feel so long because you're enjoying yourself, and that so much is happening, and there's so many jokes, and there's like beat after beat after beat, so many scenes one after the other. That potentially it's that fact of well, you know, I'm enjoying it. I'm having fun. So by the time it ends, it's like that didn't feel like it was going on that long at all. Um, but I enjoyed it. I would say probably I enjoyed it a bit more than Dawn of the Dinosaurs. Now I still prefer Dawn of the Dinosaurs because I like the dinosaur pirate side of it, obviously. But again, I love pirates as well. But I like this movie a bit more because it gets into it a lot quicker. You get into the action, you get into the swashbuckling, you get into the pirates, you get into the whole Continental Drift. Everything just moves a lot quicker. Now maybe that was the criticism from the third movie, and the people at Blue Sky were like, okay, for this movie, we just got to get into it. No slow down, no mini adventure with Sid. Let's just get into it because again, Pixar did it with Mater. Cars 1 came out. Mater, again, my mum loved Mater. I love Mater. My mum loved him that much. She ended up going out to the shop and buying a little one of those little mini cars, and then getting some blue tack and blue tacking it to the dash of her car, so that as she drove around, she had little Mater. She loved it, absolutely, mate. And she loves Cars 1, and she's watched it tons and tons of times just because of Mater. It was a crowning achievement, crowning sort of glory for Pixar. They really struck gold with that character. And then they made Cars 2, which is a bag of dog turds. It's a terrible film. And they fixed it. They rectified the Cars franchise with Cars 3, and I still class Cars 3 as the sequel to Cars 1. I'm not here to talk about that movie, but the point I'm trying to make here is the fact of Pixar themselves, being big as themselves, they try to capitalize on a character, and when they did so, it didn't work, and people didn't enjoy a good hour and a half of a bumbling character like Mater. Like, Mater's fun in small bursts, and Mater is fun when he's with a group of people, but on his own, he gets a bit annoying and a bit jarring. And that was my sort of takeaway from Sid's mini adventure, is the fact of Sid's fun. I enjoy Sid. I like Sid. I'm not knocking Sid. But I don't want a whole adventure of him. I wouldn't want a movie of like the Ice Age, Sid's Grand Adventure. I don't want it. I'll watch it because I'm curious. But unless Sid has a band of characters that sort of counteract his silliness, I just feel like it'd be another Cars 2 situation. And potentially that was what was going through Blue Sky Studios' heads of like, Sid's a popular character. Let's have him have a mini sort of adventure in this one. It didn't work, didn't pan out, and maybe that's why they changed it and went back to formula with Ice Age 4, was the fact of, okay, that whole mini sort of sub-series thing that we tried to do didn't work. Let's just get into it with this one. And it works perfectly, that they really get into it, really get going. It's fun, it's interesting. Yeah, so overall, I can recommend this one. I can recommend all the Ice Age movies, really, but if you were stuck on a plane and you had to watch either Dawn of the Dinosaurs or this one, I would say Dawn of the Dinosaurs, but skip the beginning and just wait until they go underground to the dinosaurs. But if you wanted something that you didn't have to skip, that you could watch from start to finish, and you knew you were going to have a good time and you would have the action, then Ice Age Continental Drift would be obviously the more better choice. One other thing I want to mention is the fact of, as I said in the introduction, this movie was made for 3D. Obviously, I didn't watch it in 3D, but you can tell that there are many scenes in this where they played for 3D. Now, 3D's never worked with me. I've gone to cinema and watched 3D films. I've had 3D videos. My dad had a 3D TV. I've tried it all. Either my eyes are broken or 3D doesn't work. I've just never been able to get the 3D effect ever. It's never like it's advertised where they advertise 3D and you're like, whoa, I've never had that. I even went to go watch, right? They released, I think it was when they re-released Star Wars: The Phantom Menace in cinemas. They released it in standard, or they released it in 3D. And me and my dad went to go see the 3D one, right? And I sat and I watched the whole of that movie in 3D because I thought it would be good. And obviously that movie wasn't made for 3D, so it didn't work. But there were moments where I was just like, why did they do this? Why? Another little bit of a side quest for you there, but the point is I'm trying to make is the fact of you can notice the 3D elements that they try to do, but again, you don't need a 3D movie or 3D version to enjoy it. It's just the fact of you can tell they played more to the 3D. But either way, it's still a fun film, and I think you still enjoy it. And if you have kids, these kids will still enjoy it. I am just a nerdy adult, and I like to nitpick old animated movies. So don't listen to me. Don't take me seriously. I like to have fun, and I just go a bit deeper than I should do with these films. But again, that's been my thoughts and feelings on Ice Age 4 Continental Drift. Hope you liked them. Hope you enjoyed them. If you would like to hear more from me, then you can find the Nerdstalgic podcast basically everywhere and anywhere you can find podcasts, really. The only place you can't find me is Apple Podcasts currently. You can also find the Nerdstalgic podcast on YouTube. If you're currently listening on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe and all that jazz. It helps me out immensely. Make sure you ring that bell as well. Just type in the Nerdstalgic podcast into YouTube and you'll find me there. Also, if you listen to this on Spotify, don't forget to give a star rating, please. It helps me out immensely. You can have a choice between 1 to 5 stars, whatever you feel like is fair. Whatever you choose, help me out greatly. Yeah, so I have been your host, Luke the Human. You've been listening to the Nerdstalgic podcast. I appreciate you all so greatly, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye, beans.